We'll call the Senate Finance Committee meeting to order. First bill that we're going to hear is House Bill 1678 FN. And who is here to introduce the bill? Is Do we have the prime sponsor? Oh, okay. You can introduce yourself and the bill when you're ready.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My name is Representative Alexis Simpson, and I'm the prime sponsor of HB 1678. I represent Rockingham District 33, which is Exeter, Newfields, Newmarket, and Stratham. I want to thank you all for hearing HB 1678, which is to establish a New Hampshire farm-to-school local food incentive pilot program. HB 1678 creates a 2-year pilot program to get more local food into local schools. It would encourage schools to spend over $400,000 federal food dollars in New Hampshire while taking a relatively small investment from the state over a 2-year time frame of $241,000. At the end, we would have data from all 10 counties about the feasibility of a statewide program. Investing in our local and regional food systems, especially our rural economy, makes a big difference in the economic viability and resilience of our small and medium-sized farms and local communities. This bill represents many years of dedicated time and energy from stakeholders across the state, those in the agriculture and food sectors, those in school nutrition programs, and those community members who are part of the infrastructure that makes the local food economy thrive. Last year, we submitted a bill requesting state investment in a farm-to-school program that all school districts across the state could access. After feedback from our legislative colleagues and conversations with the Department of Agriculture, we're asking this year for the development of a pilot program to help us assess whether it's feasible to have a statewide local food program. The Department of Agriculture is willing to support the program as it would benefit our farms and our agricultural food chain. Local food nourishes children, supports local farmers and fishermen, and strengthens the resiliency of our supply chain. There are currently some schools across the state who would like to get involved in the Farm to School program who need support and encouragement fiscally and operationally. The pilot program would allow one school district in each of our 10 counties to participate. It would also allow for some training around culinary skills, like knife skills in particular. Schools across the state can apply to the Department of Agriculture, who will put together a committee and criteria to choose participating schools. The department will then also gather data from the pilot program in order to discern if and how best to go about a farm-to-school incentive program that be accessible to all schools. A couple months ago, the United States Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, spoke here in New Hampshire. He described the many ways that we can support farming and rural communities in New Hampshire. And one of the ways we can do this is by investing in our local and regional food systems. The Farm to School program allows the state to do just that. Not only can we help our rural economy, but we can also improve the health and well-being of our children and the resiliency of our local food system. A robust farm-to-school program will help strengthen New Hampshire's agriculture sector, local economies, and our food security in the state. And then I'm here to answer your questions and also have folks behind me who are prepared to answer any questions, including the program administrator of the Farm to School program that's part of the Sustainability Institute at UNH, and then also from New Hampshire Hunger Solutions, Brody Deshays is prepared to outline the differences between what we originally introduced to the House and how the House amended the bill as well, if you have questions specifically.
Questions to the senators. Senator, and happy birthday.
Thank you.
Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you. I have a question on page 1 of the bill, line 24 and 25. It says reimbursement funds may be used to purchase food. And so my question is, what else may they be used for, if not food?
Right, so such guidelines shall, including maximum basement reimbursement funds, may be used to purchase food. So in some cases, we have found that schools aren't used to cooking with fresh ingredients, so they will need to use, to purchase, there's a special machine that cubes vegetables, for example, that often they don't have the funds to purchase. So that's something, and that's after they get the reimbursed money back. Does that make sense? So they've already bought the local foods with 2/3 of or with their own money, then they're reimbursed for 1/3 of the portion up to amount. But then when they get that reimbursed money, then they can use it to purchase food, but also equipment if they need it.
Thank you.
Senator Alessandro,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very
why
much.
don't you push your mic down a little bit, please?
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are we going to encourage the CTE centers to promote agricultural programs in terms of, developing farm lots and so forth in the vicinity of the CTE centers? For example, I know in Hudson, that was a big deal. They had a lot of that agricultural stuff going on in conjunction with the center. Are we going to emphasize that?
I personally wholeheartedly endorse that, and I know that a lot of the stakeholders I work with do that work through other aspects of their programs. But after feedback from the House and from the Education Committee specifically, we did not get into any curricular specifics with this bill and allow those curricular specifics to be school or locality created, or through other programs like Ag in the Classroom or 4-H, or as part of the school's own, if they take on particular curricular work, they can do that on their own. Yeah. But it often does go hand in hand with this program.
Oliver?
Programs like the Future Farmers of America, that's got to still be functioning. And,
Absolutely.
It seems to me that there'd be a good relationship here.
Yes.
If that could be organized and move forward.
Definitely. And I don't know if the current farm to school director, if that's part of her programming, she could speak to that as well. But it's definitely a natural connection. And we found at the local level, these natural connections happen. I think that's part of what I call the infrastructure that makes this possible, is not just the pipeline between farms and fisheries and schools, but it's also the people and programs that are practically on the ground growing and doing the work.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Senator Pearl?
Thank you. Thanks for coming in today.
Yes.
So I'm just trying to make sure I get my head around the bill here. So you're looking to have essentially one school in each county that's going to participate in this. They'll be awarded a grant, and then the school will then contract with local farms to fill out the products or provide whatever products that they have available. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, and there will be a committee that's outlined in the bill, so that it's similar to other committees that the Department of Agriculture has put together for other grants, so that they're kind of used to doing that. And then that committee will choose from the applicants in each county, and then they'll have the grant, and they'll build the relationships with the farmers in the local area to their schools, so that they can, the idea being that they will make those relationships themselves and then can build on that in the future as well.
Follow?
Go ahead.
So it will be up to the school, whoever their procurement department is at that point, to decide, make sure they're getting good quality produce and value for their dollar, at least paying reasonable prices for it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and part of the money will go to a part-time administrator that will help with best practices for the schools, so to help them get online, so to speak.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Cindy?
Just,
Excuse
thank you. So the reimbursement is for food, equipment, and personnel?
Yes, so the reimbursement piece is $70,000 per year for 2 years. And then there's a part-time coordinator of the program, which is $35,000 per year. And then the remaining is to train the staff on how to, like I said, there's not necessarily trained in how to process and serve fresh food. So the food bank does excellent trainings and are used to training folks in the food service industry. So there will be training with them.
Are we going to get a fiscal note that's provided?
You
There
You
is
should
one.
have a basic fiscal note. I have these numbers from the original budget that was put together that adds up to the 241,500. And I think specifically, Stacy Purslow has those details as well.
Okay.
Senator Alessandro, you had a question also?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm reading the narrative from the House, you know, the blurb. It says this program will encourage local firms to produce healthful foods for consumption in New Hampshire schools entirely within state authority, with no ties to federal programs. No ties to federal programs. Now, there's the commodity distribution program. There are a series of other programs that provide nutritional assistance for schools. But there'll be no synergy between these two items?
No, there are federal programs with ties. I mean, all of school nutrition is integrated. There's federal guidelines for what food can be served and qualify for money from the federal government for just your basic meal. And so I'm not sure. I don't think, I didn't write that piece, so I don't know what that.
I'm trying to figure out what this means, because it doesn't make sense to me. But anyway, thank you. Who wrote the blurb?
So a member of the education committee wrote the blurb, I believe.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, thank you very much. Representative McGuire.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Dan McGuire. I represent the town of Epsom. So this bill came to the House Finance Committee, and our vote on it was entirely partisan, but it got with the my party against, and but it got overturned on the floor, and that's why it's here in front of you today. And our logic in rejecting the bill is mostly based on the fact that the fiscal committee accepted a federal program that does essentially the same thing, but in a less bureaucratic way. They accepted, this is last summer, they accepted $559,000 for a program that pays for local food to go to districts that have high numbers of free and reduced lunch, basically. So whereas this bill would help 10 districts, that federal program, I believe it's about 40 or more districts that get assistance. And the amount of money in that program is multiple times this. So, and that's all federal, and this is general funds. So we just thought that there's better uses of general funds, including the two bills you're about to hear soon. To answer Senator D'Alessandro's question, the blurb was written by Representative Grassi from Finance, and when he said there was no federal connection, that's what he was referring to, because in my blurb I said, we have this other federal program. And so he meant it in contrast to my blurb, that this is a local program and the federal program is different. That's all he was talking about there. And I'm happy to answer questions.
Questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
New Hampshire Hunger Solutions, looks like Brody.
I'll see pronouncing my last name.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, to the Finance Committee, and I see a number of co-sponsors here. So rather than read my
You need to
testimony.
State your name again.
Oh, yeah,
now
Brody
that you're on.
Deshays. I represent New Hampshire Hunger Solutions. I'm one of our registered lobbyists. I serve as our communications and policy manager. So rather than read my testimony, you guys can read that on your own time. I assume you're busy. I'll cover it in a few sentences, which is access to local food is good for students. When it's integrated properly into curricula, it encourages healthier choices in the future. And this bill will support local farms in New Hampshire. Now, I also attached to the packet that I've distributed to all of you the original amendment, the original bill, and then how it was amended by the House and every single substantive change that they made to the bill. I'm more than happy if it would help the community to go over each of those, but I want to touch on a few things based upon some of the previous testimony I heard. So, no, this bill does not, the food procured does not have to meet the federal procurement requirements. That was removed from the bill on the House side. It also allows for fluid milk to be procured, which isn't always typical of farm-to-school programs across the country. The amendment was written by Representative Belcher in the House Education Committee. He felt as if having it tied to the federal program would make it harder for schools to procure food from farms and increase the reporting requirements. That's at least from the discussions that they had with us during the hearing and during the executive session. I'll mention regarding the federal program is each of those grants that's over $10,000 needs to be approved by governor and council. That has made it a very difficult process to get schools these federal funds that they qualify for, predominantly Title I schools. A lot of school districts have been deterred by some of the reporting requirements in the federal program. They have also been not very willing to want to apply for governor and council, and governor and council has not taken up a grant in a number of months. So the Department of Ag has requested that schools stop applying for the grants because there's such a backlog currently. So this program, the goal would be that it's a New Hampshire run program. You don't have to go through governor and council for approval. And ultimately, by showing a test trial of 10 schools across the 10 counties in New Hampshire, we can show proof of concept and justify why a program like this is, a New Hampshire program is good for New Hampshire schools, New Hampshire students, and New Hampshire farmers. So we're asking for a small investment of about $120,000 to prove proof of concept and then to go and show you actual data as to how this has benefited local farms. And with that, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions or go over any substantive changes in the bill.
Questions from senators? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Stacy, from New Hampshire Farm School. I got the last part of it, but I'm trying to read your printing.
Thank you, Senator Gray. Yes, my name is Stacy Purslow with the New Hampshire Farm to School program. So, farm to school programs and activities include procurement in which schools source and serve local foods in the cafeteria, education related to food, agriculture, and nutrition, and school gardens. Farm to school programs exist in every state, and in New Hampshire, we started ours in 2004. This farm to school reimbursement pilot program, also called a local food purchasing incentive, will increase educational opportunities, support local farmers, and nourish communities. Specifically, this pilot program will increase investments in New Hampshire agriculture and increase access to locally produced and higher quality foods by students in participating schools, will develop or strengthen local supply chain resiliency, which can protect against future supply chain disruptions as experienced during COVID, encourage direct purchases from farms, allowing the farm to get better prices, divert federal dollars usually spent on food from far away into the New Hampshire economy, have at least a 3-to-1 return on investment with potential for more economic impact, and increase student excitement about and engagement with school food. The benefits of such a program that I've just stated come from data about similar programs in other states. 16 other states have programs, including some of our neighbors. This bill is a small investment with big impact and a program that follows on the heels of New Hampshire's current cooperative agreement program, which Representative McGuire mentioned, which was a one-time funding opportunity from the state, from the USDA, that supports qualifying schools to make local and regional food purchases. That program is expected to end this year. So it was really only good for one school year. While some local food does not cost more than non-local food, other local foods such as fresh fruit and proteins will likely cost more than their non-local equivalents. Although a good apple season, and I think the weather is cooperating this year so we can have a good apple season, will make them competitively priced. Factors that affect local food prices include cost of land, size of the farm, labor costs, energy costs, and other farm inputs. A farm-to-school incentive works to encourage school food operators to make the switch to same cost local food and can work to offset additional costs if local foods are more expensive than the status quo. This bill is also meant to support farmers. Farms play an important role in the state, and an incentive program can help keep farmers farming. So the number of farms in the state has been decreasing. We, as citizens of the state, spend $4 billion on food from far away. $4 billion. Farmers sell about $8.3 million to local retail food hubs and institutions in the state. There's a huge difference between the amount of money that we all spend on food and the amount of money that we buy food from New Hampshire farms. Farmland is being lost to urban development and low-density residential development, and New Hampshire's scenic farms support the backdrop for the larger tourism-based economy and provide significant employment, economic, and environmental benefits to their local communities. So it's really important that we keep farmers farming. But we also have Grand Estate Farm to Plate, which is RSA 4252A, which is a policy to support food producers, farmers, and fishers in the state and contains several principles that would be supported by this incentive program. Agriculture in New Hampshire represents a vital part of both the state's rural and urban economies and the larger food systems that connect it with the state's local and regional economies and the public. Consumer demand from individuals and institutions, including New Hampshire public schools, universities, child care facilities, after-school programs, restaurants, hospitals, and prisons for locally grown and produced food is growing and deserves support from the state and state agencies. Support of local food economies is vital to public health of our residents and to the viability and livability of our communities. Growing, producing, and buying local food represents opportunities to build resources, wealth, and resilience in local communities. Investments in local food systems retain wealth, support the local economy, and are working to increase access to quality food by schools and others. Thank you.
Questions from senators? Seeing none, thank you very much. And next on the list is NOFA New Hampshire and Nikki, and I'm going to say Cole.
Cole.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so
Wasn't
much.
sure what to do with that B at the end.
Yes, yeah, I know. My name's Nikki Kolb. I'm the operations director at the Northeast Organic Farming Association of New Hampshire. We support the bill. The Northeast Organic Farming Association of New Hampshire, NOFA-NH, is dedicated to helping people build local, just, and sustainable food systems by actively promoting organic, regenerative, ecologically sound farming, gardening, eating, and land care practices for healthy communities. As a member of the New Hampshire Farm to School Network and a statewide association representing New Hampshire farmers, gardeners, and eaters, NOFA-NH supports the Local Food for Local Schools reimbursement pilot program. This program will improve farm viability by infusing tens of thousands of dollars per year into New Hampshire's farm and food economy, provide farmers with new and increased business opportunities, increase food security and resilience in the Granite State, provide New Hampshire students with access to fresher, local, nutrient-dense foods and opportunities to learn about seasonal foods through direct experience, and allow New Hampshire's public schools to receive financial reimbursement for purchasing local foods, further incentivizing farm-to-school relationship building. New Hampshire's agriculture and fisheries are important sectors of our state's economy. They provide food access, drive agritourism, and preserve the rural character of our state. Since 2020, we've seen firsthand how a largely import-based food economy can be affected by external conditions, leading to food insecurity. And by investing in New Hampshire's farm and food economy, the Local Food for Local Schools reimbursement pilot program provides an antidote. In addition to helping our state's essential farmers, producers, and fishers thrive through the development of new sustainable markets, HB 1678 will improve New Hampshire's food security and the overall economy by keeping federal dollars in New Hampshire. If the pilot program goes well, it also sets the stage for broader institutional purchasing in future years. Please join New Hampshire's farmers, fishers, students, parents, educators, and food service providers by passing the Local Food for Local Schools reimbursement pilot program. Thank you.
Senator D'Alessandro, do you have a question?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for your testimony. At one time, the counties maintained farms. And I drive by the Goffstown County area not every day, but on my way back and forth to work on town. And the animals are all gone. The barns have been closed down. They're falling apart. The land is just fallow. It's there. Those were very productive farms at one time. Is there any interest in restoring those? I mean, there's land that's available. Obviously, it has been cultivated in the past and used in the past. Is there any synergy, any relationship between the program you're talking about and the counties?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I think it's an important question and one I'll take note of. Thank you.
Additional questions?
That's good.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I think I heard you say this program would keep federal dollars in New Hampshire. And that, I thought we were talking about state dollars, so could you please explain that?
Yes, I think we're talking about both. So there's state dollars and there's also existing federal dollars that are helping with this program, and the reimbursement will help to increase, or rather provide the reimbursements. Stacy Perslow, who previously testified, I think can share more details about that and the program.
Additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
There were 2 additional people that signed up, did not indicate they wanted, 1 in favor, 1 opposed. And the online count is? The online count we don't have right now. I guess you'll have to wait for the report. Anyone out there that changed their mind? Seeing none, we will,
I just wondered if I could answer Senator Rosenwald's question.
quickly, quickly.
Real quickly. Yeah, so it's just it's sort of a practical administrative issue where schools are using like federal food dollars for school lunches to buy food. And so they're, instead of spending that money in a different state on, say, food that was processed or grown in a different state, and then the schools bring it in from another state with their federal food dollars, they would be spending those federal food dollars in our economy. So keeping the money locally as opposed to like money that schools already get for school lunches.
Okay.
And then, so I can talk with you later, but schools already spend federal money for school lunch food, and we just want them to spend it in New Hampshire. So if they spend money in New Hampshire, then they get reimbursed for 1/3 of that money from the state. So it's an incentive to spend all the federal money that they can in the state. Then they would get a small reimbursement as an incentive to spend that money here in New Hampshire when they're buying food. Yeah, we can talk later for sure.
And with that, we'll close the public hearing on House Bill 1678. And as soon as we're ready, we'll open the public hearing on 1307. Okay, who's introducing 1307?
I'll play it. Are we on number 2? Yes.
Yeah. So Representative Damon's not here? Okay. Representative McGuire. If you would introduce yourself and the bill.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Senators. I'm Carol McGuire, representing Merrimack District 27 and Chair of the House ED&A Committee, which sent you this bill. And what it does is it takes people who are retired on a disability retirement and makes sure that they get the occasional cost of living increases that we grant. The last one we passed, I think it was in 22, was limited to people who had served for 20 years. Well, if somebody's been injured on the job, they can't continue to serve for 20 years in many cases. So people who were otherwise qualified for that cost of living increase didn't get it because of the that limitation. So what this bill adds in the a one-time $500 benefit, and changes the cost of living increase section of 100A to add that a disability retiree will receive any supplemental allowance regardless of minimum years of service specified in the legislature.
Okay. Questions from senators? Oh. Senator Berthold.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my question. You recently heard a piece of legislation on the new disability, the violence due to. Would that be included in this? It hasn't passed yet.
The people who are currently receiving accidental disability that would qualify for that program would not have been eligible for that cost of living increase because they haven't been retired long enough. They didn't work long enough. This would add them in.
Okay, so the violent disability would be included in this.
Actually, no. The violent, that's a new law.
Right.
It hasn't yet passed. I would suggest that that we consider changing adding them into what is RSA 100A6 Roman 2D, which specifies that people who have an accidental disability receive these benefits, and add that in as well.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions?
Thank you. I see that the pension ceiling is 50,000. Is that the same as what we did last?
No, we had 30,000. The reason is that most people who are out on accidental disability are Group 2, and they do not receive Social Security.
Okay.
So we waved our hands a little and said that 50,000 without Social Security is more or less equivalent to 30,000 plus Social Security. And if that number is wrong, well, we'd love to have you corrected. But the intent was that a person who is out on disability, a Group 2 person doesn't get Social Security, so they wouldn't receive, their pension is much less than anyone who is receiving Social Security.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Seeing none, thank you. NHSPFFRA, Arthur.
You enjoyed that. Long after.
Hey, I mean, he took the time to write all those letters down. At least I can do is pronounce them, right?
Well, they all mean something. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for the record, my name is Arthur Beaudry. I am the president of the New Hampshire State Permanent Firefighters Retirement Association, and I'm a retired captain from the city of Manchester and a past trustee of the New Hampshire retirement system for 13 years. I am here today in support of House Bill 1307, which would grant a stipend to retirees who have been injured in the line of duty. This is a group of individuals that did not want to retire. They had to due to their injuries sustained from work. Retirees have received one COLA since 2010. It was a 1.5% cost of living increase based on the member's retirement capped at $50,000. Over the last decade, a cost of living based on the CPIU has gone up approximately 29.33%, while COLAs granted to Group 2 police and firefighters over the same time period were 1.5%. Over the last 20 years, the cost of living has gone up approximately 64.53%, while COLAs granted to Group 2 police and firefighters over the same time period were 12.25% and 15% respectively. That is over 52% of a pensioner's buying power that has been eliminated due to the inflation and the lack of adequate COLAs. In 2022, a $500 stipend was granted predominantly to Group 1. Out of this $11.6 million fiscal note, Group 1 received $10.75 million. Over 92% of the $11.6 million went to Group 1. Of the 23,267 eligible recipients, there were only 498 Group 2 fire receiving the stipend. Last year, the Senate changed a bill that allowed for a Group 2 COLA benefit to include Group 1 and changed the eligibility of the stipend to members making less than $30,000. Again, those eliminated a large number of Group 2 members. The average Group 2 firefighter is approximately $45,000. Remember, Group 2 does not receive Social Security. Social Security has given their members an 8.7% increase in 2023 and a 3.2% this year. Unfortunately, Group 2 police and firefighters don't receive Social Security. Under the Windfall Act of 1984, if a Group 2 member were to be eligible for Social Security, their benefits would be reduced by a minimum of 40% and as much as 90%, depending on their pension. Predominantly, New Hampshire retirement system is what Group 2 members rely on for their retirement income. Very simple math will show that the members that in a matter of time, without COLA adjustments, pensioners will be forced on some kind of social services because pensions will be devoured by inflation. Most states provide retirees with a cost of living raise. The state of Maine, for example, who came to testify in request of the Decennial Committee, offers a 3% COLA to their retirees. Massachusetts offers an ad hoc COLA based on the CPIU of 5% applied to the first $13,000 benefit. Vermont offers an automatic COLA based...
I think that we've heard enough from other states. It can be in your written testimony. We can get it, so if you'd continue.
Okay, that was the last one anyways. Vermont was the last one. Granting a reasonable COLA for the retirees will greatly reduce the impact inflation has on them over the last 2 decades. The stipend offered in House Bill 1307 is nowhere near what our retirees should have received, but is a step in the right direction. I ask that you please support your disabled workers whose injuries were sustained from their employment and vote in favor of House Bill 1307. And I'll answer any questions.
Questions from senators? I think we're good.
Thank you.
Hampshire Retirement System, Marty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Marty Carlin, representing the New Hampshire Retirement System. NHRS doesn't have a position on this bill as it's a policy decision. The COLA portion this year, I call it a temporary supplemental allowance, i.e. one-time payment, would affect approximately 800 accidental disability members or beneficiaries receiving a benefit from that person. So, it's about $400,000 as an appropriation. Senator Bertzel brought up a good question about Senate Bill 134. There's two parts of this bill. The one with the $500 payment, actually, it's limited to anybody who is retired on or before, 7/1 of 2018. And the creation of the Violent Disability Benefit in SB 134 has a retroactive look back to anyone who retires on or after 7/1 of 18. So those folks, because of their retirement date, who would be retroactively covered, wouldn't be subject to this just because it happens to line up. However, the second part of the bill with the language regarding any accidental disability retirees would get a supplemental allowance or COLA regardless of any service requirements, that would probably have to be amended next year to include this new benefit if that passes, because it's, you know, we can't really add it yet, type of thing. So that would be a cleanup type legislation. And not all of these one-time payments or COLAs have been tied to number of years of service. That has happened in the past with sometimes when the legislator has granted these benefits. For instance, the prior year to the this one, it was anybody you know, who had retired more than 5 years and was under 30,000. So there was no years attached to that one. I think different legislatures have looked at it as trying to reward low-income, long-service employees versus others and things like that. So there's not always a service requirement in there. So that's a couple things I just wanted to clarify. I'd be glad to answer any questions anyone has.
Questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much. Is there anyone who's changed their mind, wants to speak? Okay, do we have an online count on this one? No. Okay. And with that, we will close the public hearing, and we'll open the next one in just a minute. Go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Once again, Dan McGuire, representing Epsom. First of all, I have to give you Representative Leishman's regrets. He is out of the country at the moment. But I would like to introduce House Bill 1647. This is a bill that we have alluded to many times in the past. It was a form of this was part of the budget. It was taken out in the Senate version of the budget and substituted with a commission. The commission met over the summer. Some of you are members, and commission voted to improve the Group 2 retirement in the way that this bill does, and so that here we have it. So that original way that So the whole thing that started was due to, I think it was 12 years ago, we were in a very tough budget year, and we substantially reduced the pension benefits of Group 2 members. And in particular, one of the big changes was that they used to have a 50% pension after 20 years of service. So therefore, the number of years times 2.5% was their pension. That was changed back then to 2%. So it required 25 years of service to get a 50% pension. Well, it turns out that that's unlike all of the surrounding states. And so in the intervening years, our corrections department, police and fire have found it very difficult to hire against superior benefits found in Massachusetts, Maine, and Vermont. And so this bill does a partial restoration of those benefits in the sense that it changes that 2% back to 2.5%, but only for years after the first 10 years of service. And it does not make any of the other changes that were made at that time in terms of the definition of income and so on. And the grand total cost of this bill is $53.6 million, and which is a considerable cut from the original bill, which was more like $250 million spread out over a 5-year period, maybe a 10-year period, I think. And so we think that this is an entirely reasonable request. I know it's large, but we have a serious hiring problem, particularly in the Department of Corrections and in other similar places, and this would go some ways to improving that situation. And I don't know if Representative McGuire would like to add anything.
Yes, thank you. Carol McGuire, Merrimack 27. I was the chair of the commission that worked on the retirement benefits. And this was a recommendation of the commission that we restore the 2.5% multiplier and extend it to new hires, not just to the people who were in service at the time of the change, but to the people who were hired in those positions after that. So that's what this does. It gradually restores the 2.5%. And I must say that the commission and the ED&A committee were both concerned about the cost. There was an amendment adopted in ED&A to only give the full multiplier to those who had served a full career, not for people who had served less than I believe 20 years. And so we tried to trim it. Finance tried to trim it based on later estimates. We have done our best to make the employees as whole as possible while still being able to afford it. And I will try to answer any questions.
Questions from the senators for either Representative McGuire? I think that they're all.
I'll make, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I'll make 2 more small points. One is that I'm told that there may be sort of high-level discussions about doing this, but in a lesser way. And so that I just point out that there are 2 ways you could make this cheaper. One is by increasing the 10-year cutoff to some bigger number, 12 years, 14 years, et cetera.
Which is part of the minority report.
Yes, and the other way would be to lower that 2.5% to 2.4%, you know, that kind of thing. So, so there are ways to make this less expensive. And then the other thing that is often talked about is the ongoing cost. So if you'll notice in the bill, there's a roughly $1 million a year ongoing cost to the state, and a maybe 3.8 million ongoing cost to municipalities. And that's simply because the people who are not yet hired into these jobs also get an improved benefit, and there's a cost to that improved benefit. But there's no way for us to pay for that today because we don't know how many people and where they are. So that's an ongoing cost for a superior benefit. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you very much. Senator Susie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Donna Susie, representing Senate District 18. I, too, was a member of the commission and don't want to repeat some of the things that were already said by the Representatives McGuire. But I think what we do need to recognize is how we characterize this legislation. I want to take you back to the budget process because that's where the discussions about this particular issue really came up. If you refer to the June 8th journal, and I looked back, really the last piece of business that we were discussing as we were discussing the budget was this very issue. And at the time, I had tried to bring forward an amendment. We were not able to get numbers for a fiscal note from the Retirement Commission then. So as a result, the Senate President created the commission that's been talked about to look at this specific issue and to look at the issues of recruitment and retention. So the commission looked at a number of issues. There were actually 20 proposals that were submitted. 3 were recommended by the commission for legislation. 1 was sponsored by Representative McGuire regarding overtime. 1 was sponsored by me regarding the vesting period. That legislation went to interim study. And that leaves this piece of legislation. And I think that is the last remaining piece of unfinished business that we have from the budget. And I think it's really important that the committee look favorably upon this piece. We've been dealing with retirement legislation most significantly probably for the last 14 years. And the changes that have been made, many of them were structural for the whole system and needed to be made and have improved. The changes specific to the benefit structure for Group 2, though, at the time that those changes were made, there was a lot of concern expressed about what the long-term impact would be on retention of employees. And I think that's starting to bear out in our communities. The community that I happen to live in, Manchester, used to have a waiting list of anywhere from 150 to 200 people who wanted to apply to the fire department, for example. Now they're lucky to get 10, 12. It is having a significant impact. People are also leaving with 6, 7, 8 years on the job, which never would have occurred before some of these changes. And the impact of that is not just to the individual and their family and what they are potentially collecting, but it's an impact to all of us if we don't have people working in these Group 2 jobs who really work to protect all of us. And I think every time we talk about this legislation, we have to remember that we have 3 distinct groups. We have a group of people for whom, when Senate Bill 3 was passed, were part of the system and whose benefits remain the same. We had people that were hired long after, whose benefits changed, but they knew at the time they were hired. This really tries to look at those people in the middle. And I think that's really the area that we have to focus in on. The size of that group when we considered this legislation during the budget was over 1,800. I dare say it's now below 1,700. We're talking about a very discrete group of people. The number of these individuals is only going to shrink because many of them are going to choose to move on or will eventually retire. But I think we're at a critical time when we need to get back to finishing up what I consider to be some unfinished business, and also recognize that although the retirement amounts might seem like a lot compared to others, this group does not participate in Social Security. And as many times as we say that, someone always seems to be surprised by the fact that the cities and towns and the employers of these individuals in the group do not have to pay for a Social Security benefit. They're only paying for the pension benefit. And that's all these individuals can expect after retirement. So with that, I would ask the committee members to look favorably upon this legislation. I know there are some discussions going on about possible tweaks, and I certainly would greatly appreciate being a part of those, and I'm willing to work with my colleagues on it, but this is very important, not just, as I said, for those individuals impacted directly, but for all of us. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions from the senators? Seeing none?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Joshua Quigley, New Hampshire Troopers Association.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the Senate Finance Committee, my name is Joshua Quigley. Thank you.
And you can do that all over again.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Senate Finance Committee. My name is Joshua Quigley. I'm a New Hampshire State Trooper in my 16th year of service with the division. I currently serve as the troop detective for the Bedford Barracks. I also serve as the secretary of the New Hampshire Troopers Association. I'm here today to convey the strong support of the New Hampshire Troopers Association for House Bill 1647. Currently, the New Hampshire State Police continues to have an ongoing retention problem with a vacancy rate standing at 20%. The challenge of recruiting new troopers to fill these vacant positions just simply cannot be overstated. I will not reiterate the entire history of this bill beyond sharing that this bill's genesis formed in the wake of the defeat of a comprehensive retirement bill that passed the House last year. The Retirement Benefits Commission was formed to examine the retirement benefits, specifically targeting the impact of these retirement benefits for recruitment efforts and the ongoing retention problem. The New Hampshire Troopers Association President, Frank Campos, served on that commission along with some of you, and this bill comes out of that commission. House Bill 1647, just in closing, it serves as a retention tool specifically in that the benefits are applied only to members that serve or meet the full service and age requirements. Failing to do that, the benefit that it extends falls back to the existing legislation. I trust that all of you understand the challenges that the law enforcement profession at large faces today with recruitment and retention efforts. And on behalf of your New Hampshire troopers, I urge that you support this bill. Thank you.
Questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Arthur, you might as well come back up. I'm
Chairman of the committee, for the record, my name is Arthur Beaudry. I'm the president of the New Hampshire State Permanent Fire. Start all over again. Mr. Chairman, member of the committee, for the record, my name is Arthur Beaudry. I'm the president of the New Hampshire State Permanent Firefighters Retirement Association and a past member of the New Hampshire Board of Trustees and also a retired captain from the Manchester Fire Department. I am here today in support of House Bill 1647. First and foremost, I would like to thank the Commission for the work they did on creating this bill. In 2011, the legislature made some additional changes to the definition of earnable compensation. They used the term vested status instead of when a member commences service on the date of the changes. What this did was create a 6-tier system. The members who were vested, members in various stages of vesting, and the member who has just commenced service. Prior to those changes, the legislature had made changes prospectively and not retroactively. I believe this was the first time a benefit reduction was retroactive. When an employee starts his or her employment, there is an expectation that the benefits offered to when hired will be there when they retire. When the legislature made these changes, I truly believe that most of them didn't know or understand the long-term effects of the changes, and if they had, would have considered implementing them differently. When the Senate downshifted its obligation to when the state downshifted its obligation to the cities and towns to pay the 35% of the retirement cost and retroactive changes to the pension benefits, the employee was affected both at the bargaining table and their pension. These changes made it extremely difficult for local communities to offer a competitive compensation package to attract new employees and retain their existing employees. Since the changes to the plan benefits, we have seen recruitment down and many veteran firefighters have left the profession. In House Bill 1647 doesn't restore the benefits that House Bill 436 would have, but again, it is a step in the right direction. I would ask that this committee support the Commission's recommendation and move on to pass on House Bill 1647, and I'll answer any questions.
questions from the senators? Seeing none.
Thank you very much.
Arthur.
I'll leave it on.
Mark Bowden.
Well, the mic is still on, so I don't have to worry about that.
All right.
Thank you, Chairman Gray and members of the committee. My name is Mark Bowden. I'm a retired sergeant from the New Hampshire State Police. I'm here today representing the New Hampshire Police Association, which represents thousands of police officers across the state. You've heard a lot today about recruitment and retention. Recruitment and retention has become a problem with most departments having a vacancy rate of anywhere between 10 and 20%. Speaking with departments the size of Manchester and Nashua just last week, we were talking about vacancies. Retention, you're also seeing something that we never saw before, which was police officers leaving, 8, 10 years into their careers and just leaving and going into the private sector and doing something else. You never used to see that before. And so historically, I'm just going to add this little component that you might not have heard of before. Prior to this, what happened back in SB3 in 2011, 2012, the retirement system acted like an anchor, which basically kept employees in the state because it was a good benefit. We were attracting individuals from outside the state, such as Massachusetts. At the time in the late 90s and early 2000s, I was a police officer working for the town of Hudson, and many of my coworkers were from Massachusetts. I myself was born and raised in Nashua, so I was actually just next door. But the retirement system acted like an anchor, and I can tell you from personal experience that it acted as an anchor for me. When I was 29 years old, I had the opportunity. I had applied to the FBI with the chance of going to the FBI. My wife and I had some discussions when I was given the opportunity, and one of the reasons that I decided to stay in New Hampshire was because of the retirement system. And so this bill is a small step to trying to restore some of that. And I would say that, as the system becomes more solvent as you move on towards 2039, I don't think the problem is going to be done there. I think as a state, we need to do something to try to increase these benefits to act more, again, as an anchor to keep these individuals in these positions. Because law enforcement is really a profession that you want people to make a career out of, not as a job. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions that the senators may have.
Questions from senators? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Brian Grill?
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Brian Rill, the president of the Professional Firefighters of New Hampshire, and I am a fire captain in the city of Portsmouth. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm not going to rehash the history that everyone previously mentioned. I would like to thank Representative McGuire's times two for their work on this and for introducing this bill. I had the pleasure of serving on the commission with some of you folks. It was a commission that I would say that we were a little bit cynical of at its start, based upon the fact that we had so much success with House Bill 436 last year in the House, and we saw it die here with this committee. We had some concerns that we would be able to get anything done out of that commission, but we chose to put our best foot forward to collaborate towards some restoration of some pension benefits. We had a lot of really productive dialogue, so I thought, but what had come out of that commission, as Senator Soucy mentioned, were a few recommendations. And it is my interpretation of the process that to continue to believe in the integrity of the process, those recommendations should be heavily looked at by the committees and then have an opportunity to go to the floor. One thing that was incredibly concerning to me was a bill that we believed was a layup that came out of that commission on the vesting, and that subsequently died here. The reason why that's relevant today is I continue to remain somewhat concerned that this commission really had an opportunity to put our best foot forward and get something done. I would really like to hope that this committee would take a good hard look at the recruitment and retention issues that we have in this state and take into consideration what this bill does. I understand that there is a cost to this bill. There is a cost to doing business in the state of New Hampshire, just like everywhere else. I know it's expensive, but where we started last year with HB 436 at $250 million some odd dollars, and where we are now, we've come a long way. And what we're asking is for this committee to give us an opportunity to show you that this is a potential benefit that could keep your firefighters, your police officers, your correctional personnel here in the state. There's been no dispute that there is a problem with recruitment and retention in New Hampshire. No dispute from this committee or others like it. What we're asking you to do is to take this opportunity to fix it. Last year on the Senate floor, there were a lot of comments and a lot of support for wanting to get something meaningful, impactful, and immediate done to keep firefighters in the state of New Hampshire. Right now, we're losing them. You heard it from Senator Susie early, that since we started this conversation, we've already lost 100 public safety personnel from the 18 to 1700 Tier B group. We can't continue to let this happen. Please, I would ask that you put your best foot forward and allow this bill to pass today. Thank you.
Questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much. New Hampshire retirement system, Marty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, for the record, Marty Carlin, representing the New Hampshire retirement system. NHRS doesn't have a position on the bill as it's a policy matter. I did provide a handout to the commission, which is the same one we provided to the House. And there's some extra copies on the table if anybody in the crowd wants to grab one. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I think if we had one or two more commission members in the room, you probably would have had a quorum. So the folks who spoke before me, I covered all the highlights, accurately and concisely. So I don't want to repeat, all of that testimony to you. I will point out that with this bill, we talk about the 3 tiers in Group 2 and in Group 1. The Tier A are the folks whose benefit calculations didn't change back in 2011. That's a small and shrinking portion of the active population. That's about 12% as of last June 30th. So it's probably smaller now. The Tier B group, the folks who were the subject of the House Bill 436 last year, that represent about 28% of Group 2 as of the end of the last fiscal year, 1,642 members. And then those hired on or after 7/1 of 11, Tier C represent 59%, a little bit under 3,500. So those are the pools of folks covered by the bill currently. And the last page of the handout is something we put together that just kind of illustrates how the benefit accruals work for all the different tiers. Basically, anyone, regardless of where they fall on any of the tables, would begin accruing 2.5% of their average final salary as a benefit accrual for any year after year 10 that they keep working. The sort of stairway of bold lines farther down the page shows the minimum years of service required for each of those tiers. And then, if they kept working, they'd just keep accruing the benefit that way. So that's just sort of a graphical way to look at who's affected by this benefit and how it works for them. That said, as I said, I think everything else was pretty well covered. I'd be glad to answer any questions anyone has about the bill or any other questions that I can't answer.
Questions from the senators? Senator Bradley.
So, good afternoon, Marty. How are you?
Good, sir.
Based on the testimony of the 2 House reps, if I can paraphrase it, where they, excuse me, indicated that they wanted to see a fix, but they knew how expensive it was, and they didn't propose any alternatives other than the 2.5% after 10 years for Tier B and Tier C. Could you give me a back-of-the-envelope estimate if Tier C were dropped and we went with the 2 scenarios that had been discussed in the commission of Tier B, 10 years at 2.5%, what that unfunded liability cost would be, and the second scenario would be Tier B at 15 years at 2.5%.
I can give you a ballpark on that because we kind of anticipated that might be one of the questions that would come here. And we at NHRS had some conversations with the actuary. We couldn't do a fiscal note worksheet on a proposal without actually seeing the language in it, coming out of one of the bodies. So this is a range. That's the actuary, if scenarios like that, what would be a range of outcomes? So don't count it to the penny, or anything like that. Taking Tier C out of the current bill, keeping everything else the same, the 10 years and the would have about an unfunded of between 37 and 40 million. The current bill has, I think, 53.6. And the normal cost, that future accrual rate going forward for benefits, because Tier C and future hires weren't counted, that would reduce the rate by approximately 50 to 60%. So that annual number on the fiscal note, the 910 for the state and 3.5 million for the subs, would be reduced by 50 to 60%. So this was a rival. Another proposal that the Retirement Benefits Commission did not vote to adopt was making this multiplier change effective at 15 years instead of 10. I think, and they actually had done an analysis of that for the commission last fall. Looking at this bill, that unfunded would be, in the range of 25 to 30 million. And the normal cost going forward would be reduced even more significantly, in the 70%, 70 to 80% range. And that's because the normal cost of future benefits as they're accrued, if this was limited to Tier B, most of that cake is baked. So that's the unfunded piece, but the working life of members in Tier B would be shorter. So that's why the normal cost would be less. It's a smaller piece of the total pool of membership. And again, these were very rough estimates, but just to give a range of outcomes, potential range.
Follow-up?
So what would it take for GRS and the New Hampshire retirement system to actually do a workup on, the actual costs? Would it be this committee drafting an amendment for both those scenarios? Would it be this committee adopting an amendment for both those scenarios? What would it take?
Yeah, ideally under the statutory triggers for doing fiscal notes, full-blown valuations, there would need to be, an amendment would need to be adopted and passed by the body. So we could certainly have something if the Senate goes with this, in time for a committee conference, if the House requests one, if the bill was amended from their version. I would have to talk to some leadership at the retirement system to see if there's anything we could do outside of that. I know we had done that in the past with exigent circumstances on a very limited basis. So I'd have to get back to you on that.
So as you recall, in the commission, we use funds dedicated to running the legislature to pay for the scenarios. Isn't much of that work already done, and it could be done without Tier C in both scenarios relatively easily and without a significant cost?
I suspect it could be done because there's been a lot of permutations of this theme done already. And then the cost is again usually between that $2,500 and $7,500, because that's one of the concerns we have about sort of doing hypotheticals without something passed in front of us. It's trust fund assets. That way it wouldn't be covered under the statute where the legislature automatically reimburses us in the due course for other bills and amendments and things like that. So that's why we were able to do that for the commission last year, because the speaker and yourself authorized that funding for us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Rosenbaum.
Thank you.
Marty, we heard testimony that there are currently about 1,700 people who in Group 2 would be affected under this proposal. If the years went from 10 to 15, do you know how many people that would affect?
But it's in the most, we do the head count at the end of the fiscal year. So that middle tier right now is 1,642. It dropped from like 1,720 when we were talking about the bill last year. So that's the pool that would be in the tier B. And then again, there's a little bit under 3,500 in tier C, and that number has likely grown since last year.
Follow-up?
If it went to 15 years, would it still be the same number of people?
Yeah. So and I think most, not everyone, but much of tier B's already work 15, but the increase would just take effect 5 years later. So the accruals would be smaller for that 5-year difference in effective.
Thank you.
Yep.
Additional questions? I'm sure that the telephone will be ringing, Marty, I'm sure. All right, if there's no additional questions, that's the last person on my list. Is there anyone who has changed their mind and didn't testify before that wants to testify now? Seeing none, and I don't think we know the number online. We'll find that out. And with that, we will close the public hearing, and we'll go into executive session if I have a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to go into executive session. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. We are in executive session. Okay, off of the list in front of you of prior bills, the 3 bills in second committee, I'm going to hold those unless you guys overrule me. And we'll start off with HB 1054A. Do I have a motion?
I'll move inexpedient to legislate.
I will second that.
All right, we have a motion of inexpedient to legislate. And that was Senator Bradley and Senator Innes. Okay, discussion. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of inexpedient to legislate say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay.
No.
And the ayes have it, and I'll take that one out. Okay, the next bill at the top of the list is 1528.
I'll move inexpedient to legislate. Second.
We have Senator Innes move ITL. And is that Senator Bradley that seconded it?
Yes.
Any discussion on that bill? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay.
No.
The ayes have it. And Senator Innes?
Yes, sir.
You get that one. Okay. Any of the bills that we heard today that anyone wants to discuss? Senator Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, going back to 1647, I think it would be appropriate to have the 2 amendments based on the 2 scenarios that I outlined, dropping tier C. Have both of those amendments drafted, and hopefully the trustees of the New Hampshire retirement system will do an actuarial analysis based on the drafting of those 2 amendments, so we get as accurate a cost estimate as possible.
All right, and OBA will work with you to make sure that those are drafted per your request. Any other discussion? Any other of the other bills? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to come out of executive session.
So moved.
We have a motion and I'll second it. Whoop, Senator D'Alessandro seconded it. All those in favor of coming out of the executive session say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Our business of the day being complete, we are adjourned.